Welcome everyone. It is the 4th of May. That was my fault this week. I didn't turn the sound on. We had a few little hiccups last week. Hopefully the rest of today's session will be seamless. A lot to go through. And in fact, we have changed things a little bit. I had mentioned to those of you that joined us last week, and if you've been reading any of our updates throughout the week, that we wanted to really focus in on interest rates. Myself, I had actually not expected the Reserve Bank to increase rates yesterday. They did. So I really want to get stuck into that and what that means for everyone, because we've had a ton of questions coming through from about 2:31 yesterday, as soon as it was announced. What should we be doing? What does it mean? Where are things going to go? How do I control this myself? So we really want to get in depth and ask and answer as many questions as we can. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, and we'll get back to our regular schedule from next week onwards. So just while you're settling in, as always, just to get you going with some thought starters, I want to just propose to you all and make sure that we're all focused and aligned. The number one problem that happens time and time again, and it's the same thing that we always hear from people when it comes to buying a home, and what everyone tends to struggle from is, how do you buy a home that you can afford, that is right for you, that will add long-term value to your life without making a mistake? Very simple proposition, but I can guarantee that all of you will be nodding in some form, whether it's that entire problem, part of it, maybe you've solved it, or you're suffering from it right now. And that's what today's session is all about. So we're very much wanting to help you beat that problem, help you get through it so that it doesn't become a roadblock for you. Now, the solution, how do you do it? Well, you're not going to solve it overnight. However, I've come up with a very straightforward 3-part framework. Over the last 2 decades, I've worked out that really you can break it down into 3 key pillars. Within each of those pillars, they're going to help you solve that problem and come up with a solution. And the best thing for you to do is to focus in on the pillar that will move the needle the most for you, and then go and move on to the next one and the next one and continue to go through this cycle. So let's talk about it. Number 1 is find. Okay, pretty straightforward proposition. It is what probably most of you are used to and understand. You've got to find the right home. Now, that involves the right location. That involves the right type of property. It involves the right type of property for you, the right type of property for the location. Everything that we kind of know about, it can be straightforward. It can be really complex. If you don't know the location, you're moving somewhere new. You're looking to branch out for your first investment property and you only know where you live. How do you find that right location? So there's a lot of things you've got to drill in and really focus in on that. The second one is finance. Now, the best thing about real estate, owning a home, is that you can borrow and use other people's money. So you think about it, when you want to go and buy a sandwich for lunch, sure, maybe your friend will buy you a sandwich, but typically you're spending your own money. When it comes to buying a home, for the vast majority of people out there, up to 90% plus of that purchase price, you're using other people's money. So whether that be a traditional bank, a non-bank, whether that be the bank of mum and dad, whether it be a friend, maybe it be a partner, maybe it be with a group of friends, however you do it and structure it, that is what is really going to set you on the right path and will make sure that you add that long-term value to that. Because if you don't get the structure right, you don't get the finance set right, it can make what could have been a great investment and a great journey turn out to not be great. And it's something you need to continue to look at and continue to refresh and make sure that you're on the correct journey. Number 3 is manage. Now, for those of you that might be investors on the line, yes, it is things like, how do you find a tenant? How do you collect the rent? How do you look after repairs and maintenance? But it's more than that. It's about how do you manage your time, your experience, and your resources. So, it's as simple as you might be looking to buy a knockdown home and think, how hard can it be? I'm going to build the home of my dreams. Now, if you don't have the experience in how to do that, and you don't have the time to focus in and do that, that can become a nightmare. You know, you might be working a 60-hour week, yet you're expected to work all weekend to get this project off the ground. And that may not make sense for your life. So it's things like that. You know, how do you manage your experience if you don't have the experience in certain areas? You know, what can you outsource? What should you do in? How do you look after repairs? How do you manage the whole ownership of your home? Really, really important pillar. So remember, the 3 pillars. We've got find, finance, and manage. The 3 of those work together. There is no one particular one that is more important than the other. They all need to be together. But for you, you need to think about which one of these are you lacking in the most, or which one of these are most relevant to helping you overcome the problem, and focus in on that one first. Don't overdo it. Don't overload yourself and try and focus on them all at once. Think about which one is going to move the needle the most for you. Focus on that, move on to the next one, and come back and repeat it over and over and over. This is not a set and forget. So even if you're not looking to buy a new home right now, this is something that you should be doing immediately and focusing in on it, because that is how you continue to drive that long-term value and create that wealth that is so great about the Great Australian Dream. Okay, hopefully that introduction has given you an opportunity to settle in, grab your sandwich, put your feet up on the table, relax, get rid of all the distractions, put your phone on silent, turn it off, turn it over, really get rid of everything that might take your focus away. Because what I can tell you is the people that focus, give us their undivided attention, are the ones that will get value out of today. They will leave here today better for having spent the last 30 minutes with us, and be able to actually have a clear path as to where they should be focusing in and how they should be moving forward. So what are we going to do today? We're going to break it down into 3 sections. So section number 1, I'm going to give a quick roundup in less than 90 seconds as to what I've seen happening around the countryside. As I said in the introduction, it is all about interest rates this week. That is the biggest topic as it comes to it. And that's what we're going to be drilling into and really unpacking and making it, hopefully, simple for you to understand, and giving you the understanding, leveraging our experience so that you can take back that control and understand how it may apply to you today and how it may apply to you in the future, and what you can be doing to really set yourself up. So remember, that's from pillar number 2, the finance section. In the 3rd section, I'm going to identify how you might move forward from here. So as always, I get a ton of people sort of saying, that was great, I'm really excited, but how do I sort of move forward? How do I put that into play and make sure that it works? So really, really simple and straightforward proposition. All right, so first section, news. What's happening? What have I seen? And what does it mean to you? There's a timer down the bottom where it says time's up. That will count 1.5 minutes, and I will stick to it as well as I can. So let's get stuck into it. All right, first up, Reserve Bank may wait till June as old wounds still hurt. I told you at the intro, if you're listening, I didn't think they were going to increase rates yesterday. I thought they were going to wait until June, because they've been giving us forward guidance. You know, they had been saying we won't raise rates till 2024. Then last month, they had said we're going to wait for those 2 pieces of data, the CPI and wage growth, which is later this month. But guess what? They didn't. They put it up. Inflation is the highest that it's been in almost 2 decades. So we're seeing a lot of pressure coming onto them. However, a recent survey says that 84% of borrowers are okay in terms of if rates do go up. They feel that they can still afford it. Rental affordability. You might be surprised, after the pandemic, it's still an issue, and it's going to get worse, because as the students come back, migration starts coming back, everyone gets back to normal life, people start earning full wages and incomes again, it's going to get tougher and tougher and tougher. So that's really, really important to understand that whilst it might be okay for you, if you're spending more than 30% of your gross income on rent, you're considered to be under rental stress. And so you imagine for those low paid or minimum wage employees, it can be really, really tough out there. Auction results, we saw a clearance rate of 67% nationally. and both Sydney and Melbourne still had relatively strong clearance rates. However, there is no doubt it is not the same extravagant rates and clearance and number of auctions that we were seeing towards the end of last year and early this year. However, I don't think it's time to panic just yet, but really we need to see and be focused and make sure we understand what we should be doing over the coming months as interest rates go up and how that might affect us. So that is it in terms of the news. Hopefully I've covered that off. We are going to jump in. I'm going to invite the guys to come on the panel. I'm going to give a quick overview. For those of you, I'm going to try and break down as to how the Reserve Bank operates, how the federal government operates, and how the banks operate, and how you put it all into play so that you can understand it. Because whilst most of us understand when interest rates go up, it's going to cost us more for a mortgage, what is really important, and as I said at the start, what we try to do here today is to help empower you so that you can take back that control, you can understand what it means, what might happen in the future, and most importantly, how it may affect you so that you can take the appropriate action when you're needed without relying on others to tell you what to do. All right, so guys, come and join us. Someone's going to bring in my chart, which is, I think it's my new favorite toy. I've enjoyed the TV. However, I love this chart. So grab a seat, guys. So before we get in and we start asking and answering some of your questions, we have the Reserve Bank, we have federal governments, and we have your bank. Now, ultimately, most of you might only understand when your bank sends you a letter, a text message, an email, and says, good news, your interest rate is going up. Now, for a whole generation, has not actually seen interest rates go up. So this is the dawn of a new era. I think, Des, you brought your home, you know, what, in 2013?
Yeah.
2013, was it?
15?
15?
Yeah.
So you've only seen interest rates go down. So this is going to be an interesting time. Hopefully, with your experience and having spent so long together, you know what's happening.
Exactly.
But it is for a lot of people. They've never seen interest rates going up. So let's understand what it all means. There is this all-important thing called CPI, Consumer Price Index. Now, that is a fancy statistic, but effectively what it is what is the increase or decrease in the basket of specific goods and services that we, as ordinary Australians, spend and take on. So the Reserve Bank has a rule that they must keep CPI in this band here, between the 2% and 3%. So anything within this band is good. Now, why do they want the price of things to go up? So think about your coffee. Think about what you paid 10 years ago versus what you pay today, and it's probably gone up. Now, they want prices to go up, but at a gradual rate of between 2 to 3%. Why do we want that? Well, we all feel good if what we were earning yesterday is less than what we're earning today, and less again as to what we're going to earn next year. So we can do that without the real wages going up, just by having CPI go up. So Reserve Bank, you imagine what happens. We have cycles. And CPI goes like this. So the areas that we want to focus in on are these two sections here. Whenever we're outside of that band, that is when the Reserve Bank needs to take action. Now, the Reserve Bank is a separate organisation to the federal government. They have their own board and they have a mandate to just keep that CPI in there. So let's talk about the simple thing. When CPI is less than 2%, that means we're not spending enough. That means wages aren't going up enough. So what do? Well, they make it really, really easy. And I think most of us can understand this. We will reduce the interest rates. Why? Because if we're spending less on our mortgage, we've got more to spend on food, on travel, and transport, buying goods, flat screen TVs, whatever it is. And that will eventually lead to prices going up and move through this dip in here. Pretty straightforward. None of us will argue about having lower interest rates. Becky, have you ever had a customer complain when the interest rates went down?
Never.
Okay, so it's a pretty simple prospect.
But I had a lot of complaints overnight last night.
So that's a really, really easy point to understand. However, this is where it gets complicated. As soon as CPI is greater than 3%, the Reserve Bank is into its danger zone. Now, what does this mean? This means the cost of food, the cost of rent, the cost of petrol, fuel, transport, holidays, everything is more expensive, and they need to contain that. So what they actually do is they increase rates, okay? So rates will go up. Now, this might not make sense to you because you're paying more for your morning coffee, you're paying more for petrol. What do? They make you pay more for your mortgage. Now, the reason why they do this is the general concept for 99.99% of Australians is that we will do whatever it takes to keep our home. So if we now have to pay $1,000 a month more in our mortgage, we will spend $1,000 a month less on food, eating out, partying, going on a holiday, having 3 cars, whatever it is, we will cut back on everything else so that we can pay that mortgage, with the idea that prices come back down and they get within that band. So that is the theory, okay? How do we make this simple so you can understand? Well, the CPI is driven by 2 different factors. So you can have demand or you can have supply. Now, what I mean by this is that increase in prices driven by a demand factor, i.e. the new iPhone, I don't know, what are we up to, 13, 14, 15, whatever it is, comes out and you see these lines of people there, that's a demand-driven factor. And Apple can increase the price. You know, iPhone used to be $500, then it was $1,000. I think it's $2,000 now, it's probably $2,500, okay? That is a demand-driven factor, and I'm gonna give you a quick example on that in a minute. But what's really interesting, and people haven't understood or taken into account, is supply-driven factors. So just consider this. We're in the middle of an election campaign. What have all the governments done? They've offered more handouts. Now, if you think back and you were listening to what I was saying, we're spending too much. What does the government do? They give us more money to go and spend more. And why do they do that? Because they said, oh, the cost of living is going up. But that is counterintuitive because the Reserve Bank is increasing interest rates, so we don't spend as much. What does the government do? Gives us more money to spend. Not that intelligent, is it? Supply side factors are very different. There's 2 main things you can think about that are actually leading to the increase in CPI, and they're outside of our control. And I think that's why most of us are feeling a little bit uneasy. Sure, interest rates might need to go up and normalize a little bit. You know, we're out of the pandemic, but we still need to think, are we actually that well off? Maybe, maybe not. Supply side factors, there's 2 things. The war in Ukraine with Russia has reduced the supply of oil. Now that's pushed up petrol prices, okay? We all know that, it's pretty easy. Most of us have to go and get petrol. They've skyrocketed, but that's not because we're driving more, right? In fact, we're probably driving less because it costs too much. So that's not a demand-driven one. That's a supply. It's gone up. It's outside of our control because the amount of oil in the world is being reduced. The second biggest supply factor is where does most things get made? Des?
My country.
China. And what's happened in China? Everyone is locked down. And this isn't like a little Victorian lockdown that we all thought was terrible. Des, you were telling me this is a real lockdown. You're in your home, you cannot go anywhere. So all of the shipping, the exports, the imports are not happening from China. So what's happening? That's again a supply-driven factor. We're not after more things from China. We're not after more supplies. We're not after more materials necessarily. You know, sure there are some things, but there's just less out there, which means prices go up. It's simple economics, demand versus supply. And I think what most of us are feeling is that the current increase in CPI is probably driven more by supply factors than demand factors, which is why we're not feeling that strong and solid in our hip pocket. So I just want to give you an example of a demand and why the Reserve Bank increases interest rates. Okay. Becky, slim, trim, handsome man, eats out 3 times a week.
Far too much.
Okay. He's got a family of 5. And let's say he spends on average $150 an outing. Okay. Interest rates go up. He's now paying an extra $600 a month in his mortgage. So what does he do? Well, he doesn't eat out 3 times a week. He only eats out twice a week. Offsets it. What happens? Well, there's a flow. Okay. Or cafe or restaurant owner, what does he do? He's doing it. Greg's doing it. Derek's doing it. I'm doing it. We're all going out less. So he has to do 2 things. First thing he does is he reduces his prices or he discounts. You know, think of all you can eat Tuesdays. Never invite these guys. Reduces his prices. Second thing he does is he gets rid of staff. Because he used to have a full restaurant from 6 p.m. till 11 p.m. Now he doesn't. He doesn't need as many staff. The demand-driven factors. So you just think about this restaurant in isolation here. All of a sudden, they're reducing their prices. So instead of the spaghetti in a red being $30, it's now $25. He had 20 staff. He's now only employing 15 staff. Now, of those 5 staff, let's assume none of them could find a job. They've all gone on to Centrelink benefits. All of a sudden, they're not spending as much because they were getting a wage here. Now they're only getting unemployment benefits here. And all of that is what leads to bringing that CPI down. So that is the Reserve Bank's theory. That is why they increase the mortgage, because the idea is that the great Aussie dream is you will never, ever let your home go. You will pay whatever it takes to save your home at the expense of anything out. So whether it be eating out, whether it be simply buying tuck shop lunches for the kids, whatever it is, you will reduce your costs anywhere else, and that will reduce those prices, and that is a demand-driven factor. So that is what we need to understand for those of you out there that are feeling, how is it fair? You've been doing it tough. Everyone's been doing it tough. We've been locked up for the last 2 years, and all of a sudden, interest rates are going up, whilst our wages aren't really going up. We're still stuck. We actually can't find employees. Everything's not that great. Well, that is why, that is how it works, and that is the difference between demand-driven factors, supply-driven factors, and how the Reserve Bank operates. So hopefully that's set the scene, that's given you a little bit of an insight, and you might be able to understand better why this occurs. So, enough talking from me. Becky, first up, tell us, we've had probably the most activity you've had from people asking you, what's going on? What should I do? What's next? What's the general fear from everyone out there? What are they worried about? What are they asking you?
Yeah, the general fear, I think, usually comes from the unknown. And I think that the analogy that you've given with regards to supply and demand and why the Reserve Bank was forced to actually increase rates, basically what they do, they're controlling the level of household disposable income. So the more they contract your disposable income, the less, as you said, you've got to spend on everyday lifestyle products. So when it comes to interest rate rises, I think the first thing that people have to understand is that anyone who's approached the bank for a loan in the last 5 to 6 years, the assessment rates that banks have actually used have been probably 4 to 5% above whatever the standard variable rate is as well. So the banks have actually factored in interest rate rises. All that households have to do now is take a little bit more responsibility. So in the event that you've got $600 less disposable income per month, what you have to do is work out where you're going to make that up. And as you said with me, probably not down the 2 times, well, maybe 1 for me. Right? And that is just the reality from that perspective. That's what you have to do.
So what you're sort of saying is that the banks, they're confident that we can absorb this because they've either lent to us at much higher rates.
Absolutely.
You know, in 2019, you know, Des, when you first got your mortgage in 2013, 2015, you were probably paying 4%. Yeah. You know, now you're paying 2%.
Yeah, and banks aren't, sorry, Jay, banks aren't in, I always say this to clients too, banks are not in the business of going mortgage in possession, repossessing families' homes and actually selling them. That's not the business that they're actually in. So there's no...
Which is funny because a lot of people think that's all they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely not. It's the last thing they want. It's an absolute headache and a nightmare situation for them as well. And that's why they've got, hardship programs as well. If clients get into some sort of financial hardship, most banks have got hardship programs, parental leave. If one of the, if the wife falls pregnant, has to have the child and stay at home, banks are there to support you. And that's what we have to understand as well. I mean, there are reasons why rates go up. And I always use this analogy. Water always finds its own level. So there's a bit of chaos out there at the moment. It's like if you put your hand in a bath and you're stirring it and stirring, eventually your hand gets tired. Yep. You have to pull your hand out of the bath. And guess what happens with the bath water? It levels itself out. So there's a lot of...
This is from experience of having 5 kids. 5 kids. You know what it's like. Yeah. Quite a few baths with them.
Especially when you have to bath 5 of them, one at a time as well. So I think that... it's just water will find its own level. We'll get to a point where the Reserve Bank has increased rates to a level where they're controlling the CPI. Wages will have to start increasing and everything will level out eventually from that point of view. And I think that people just have to, don't panic. I mean, the amount of frantic phone calls and text messages we were getting last night as well. And it's a case of, it's very, very manageable. Give us a call. We'll explain to you what it means from that point of view. We'll go back to the banks. And there's a couple of examples just today. We went back to the banks, got a pricing discount of 0.35%. So the rate actually went down by 0.10. It's actually better off as a result of that. And people have to, clients of ours that are current clients and everyday consumers out there have to become proactive.
So Greg, we've been talking about it for a long, long time. Yep. Some people have listened and they got a fixed rate.
Yes.
Some people have listened and they've gone and got a better deal. Some people, Becky's tried to help them and they don't listen. What is the general feeling out there on the streets? Are people, is that it? Has your phone stopped ringing?
No, absolutely not. And I think what we've got to look at very clearly here, we're not even at 1% interest rates. So we've got to look at this in reality. Yeah, we've got from 0.1 to 0.35. It's way below what any of us have any experienced in that. I also believe, my opinion is that the last year or so we've had these crazy price increases. It's been amazing for everybody. It's artificial. It's been an artificial increase. So yes, interest rates, in my opinion, will level things back. And as Becky was talking about, the hands come out.
You got 5 kids, so you've done many baths as well.
So the bath water, essentially raising of interest rates will just make the water calmer again. So we're going to get a bit of those waves will start leveling out and we'll get back to a realistic place where the market is. So I also believe that with the labor market where it is, and once people start coming back in, which they are, we're going to see a bit of a supply shortage. So we're not going to say, people are, the whole world's going to come to an end, the sky's falling, the properties are going to fall. I don't believe that's going to be the case. I think we will see some rectification and then we'll see some leveling. And as long as you manage your stuff, you're not going out 25 times a week, I think we'll be okay.
25. That's just inflation.
So, and just the other things, James, like as you're saying, a lot of the inflation we're seeing at the moment, and I'm not an economist, but just looking at it, is artificial. We've got wars, we've got things like that. So the increased costs are also artificial. So we've had a lot of, again, artificial stuff happening.
Yep.
I don't think we're going to, I think we'll see some leveling out, but I don't think the world's coming to an end.
So we're not going to sort of, in your view, I go back to, I think I was still in school, and I remember, walking down the aisles in the local Coles supermarket, and they had those big signs saying inflation busters.
Yeah.
Right. Interest rates were at 16, 17, 18%.
Yes.
That's not what you're seeing coming. You're seeing a much more gradual
I think it's a gradual
pull back a little bit rather than a...
It's not like that they've gone, even if they do put it up to 1%, we're still not nearly anywhere near the levels, I've experienced that. I'm a lot older than probably not this guy, but anyway, but we've experienced those very, very high interest rates where it's insane.
Yeah.
So yes, the generation that we're in at the moment have never experienced this. I don't believe it's time to panic as long as you manage yourself clearly. And yes, we will see some rectification, but I don't see something the world coming to an end. No.
Okay. Now, the only man that I know that says, don't worry about it when costs go up. It's all tax deductible.
Yes.
That's the case if you're an investor, but not quite the case if you're an owner occupier. You know, it is going to cost you effectively, you know, to some degree, $2 for every dollar extra you got to do. It is going to cost you $2 on your own home.
Yeah.
These interest rates.
So let's say if your mortgage payment go up by like say $6,000 a year as a result of the increase of the interest rate, then if you convert it to a pre-tax income, it's something around like $10,000 to $11,000. That means you need to earn $11,000 more each year to facilitate an additional repayment of $6,000 a year. That's for owner occupier.
Okay, so I'll make it simple for everyone. Consolidate means you've only got to save $6,000 on eating out. If you want to continue that lifestyle, you've got to earn double that, okay? Now, for some of you out there that are in Bitcoin, you'll say, oh, I'll make that much before I even open my eyes and have breakfast. Fine. But for most of you hardworking, ordinary Aussies, just remember that everything for your own home is with after-tax money. And that's why Becky was explaining the banks know that you can afford it. They know that you will cut costs. And if you're cutting costs, you only need to cut the amount that you need to pay extra in your mortgage. If you intend to keep your lifestyle the same and earn more, you'll generally need to earn almost double the amount. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute. The question I heard everyone asking you yesterday as well, in amongst the fear and the worry, was, give me a fixed rate. Should I be taking a fixed rate? Let's do it now. Now, I know that you wanted to say to them, I've been banging on about this for the last 2 years and you wouldn't listen to me. Yes. All of a sudden, you're answering my call, you're texting me. You know, it was like my
popularity just skyrocketed overnight. Yeah.
You know, you felt like a rock star.
I did, I did.
So tell us, you know, Des listened to our advice. He got a fixed home loan rate about 1.99%.
He did, yes, yes.
Where are rates sitting at the moment versus variable? And I know you've got a graph here which is probably too small for people to see.
Yeah.
But you've done a bit of analysis that sort of gives everyone an idea as to whether they should be taking out a fixed rate now or maybe the break-even point.
Yeah, and I think that what's happened, I mean, that's very, very easy for me to explain, even if people can't see it. But when it comes to fixed rates, I mean, you have a look at Des a couple of years back. I might pop this here. I know that it's probably not professional with the viewers looking at me, but
come up and walk us through this.
Pop that on there. Yeah, I might do that actually. Yeah.
You've done the hard work.
Can you hear me now, Maxie? Sorry. So let me go back a few steps. When we have a look at 2 years ago, when we actually did Des's loan, I mean, fixed rates were incredibly low at that particular point in time. You know, banks had the belief, and so did the Reserve Bank, that rates were going to remain low for quite some time. So Des was fortunate that he took out a very, very good and very, very low fixed rate. What's happened over the last couple of months, we've talked that rates are going to increase. The first thing that banks have actually now done is started to increase the fixed rates. What's happened now when it comes to fixed rates, the horse is actually now bolted. And what do I mean by that? If you have a look at, you know, the average 3-year fixed rate might be sitting at, call it 4%. We've used a bit of a scaled example here at 4.79. Why we've done that is because we're going to assume that fixed rates are going to continue to go up a little bit, before people make the decision to lock in. But I had a client last night who was incredibly frantic, that desperately wanted me to somehow magically fix their rate while I was on the phone with them. And I said to her, look, Mary, what you've got to understand is this. By the time, if you fix a rate today at 4%, your variable rate is at 2.19. You need a hell of a lot of increases over the next 3 years to get that variable rate to 4%. But what you're doing, you're talking about, you're panicked because the rates have gone up 25 basis points, but you're about to lock in a rate, or you're forcing yourself to lock in a rate 2% above what the variable rate is. So what you've actually done is forced your repayments up immediately. And it just doesn't make logical sense to actually do that. I mean, because if the spread between the fixed rate and the variable rate was a lot lower, then yes, you may do that. But it's going to take you 3 years for the variable rate with an average of 0.25% increase every quarter to actually catch up to where the fixed rate is at the moment.
Yep. So I guess casinos never lose.
Never, no.
Banks, it would appear, never lose either.
Well, just look at their annual profit. I don't think they're not in the business of losing money. Yeah.
So, you know, I guess, you know, when we think about fixing rates versus variable rates, we never normally do what we should be doing at the right time. And I guess what you've done here and sort of looked at it is to say, well, if you want to have some certainty, fix a payment amount today and it never changes, so you can adjust your budget, then great. And if that's what makes sense to you, and that's, you know, part of, remember, the third pillar is managing yourself, your time, your experience. And it might be that you just want the certainty for the next 3 years, but nothing else is going to change. Then maybe that's for you. But what you're actually saying is that by the end of the 3 years, you're still behind.
Oh, absolutely,
and that's, you've assumed here that every single quarter we get
0.25% rate increase every single quarter for the next 3 years. That's the assumption that I've made. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty aggressive too. I mean, that's a 3% increase in rates in the cash rate over the next 3 years without actually knowing. And what's going to happen if all of a sudden supply and demand starts to even out a little bit? Well, guess what? The Reserve Bank will probably slow down because the CPI might be under control by that time, or the inflation rate will be under control. They might slow down rate increases and then let it level out for a period of time.
Okay. So with this in mind, and, you know, let's not forget as well, once you fix the rate and you suddenly get that big bonus or whatever, you come into an inheritance or whatever, you can't pay down without having to break that rate.
Well, only $10,000 a year you can pay down without getting hit with penalties. Yeah.
What are you sort of saying to people right today? You know, if they're calling you and stressing about it, you know, obviously we don't know everyone's personal circumstances, but as a general thing, what's the advice out there to people? Should they be rushing and locking in a rate? Should they be doing for part of their mortgage? Should they just be waiting? Where's
my recommendation is this usually, is that if you want to lock in a rate today, so you have a look at this in the first month. I mean, there's a big difference there. It's almost, what is it, $800 a month difference. If you can afford an additional $800 a month and you want to take the stress and the panic out of rate fluctuations, well, I think you'd be silly to go and force yourself. You know, I mean, you're talking about another $800 a month you force yourself to pay. Why would you do that? That's exactly right. That's after tax. I mean, why would you force yourself to do that? It's only a 25 basis point increase. What we have to do is wait and see what's the impact of that 25 point increase. Yeah. Is it going to curb inflation at all? Maybe 25 points on it. Maybe 25 points is enough for the next quarter, for argument's sake. You just have to wait for the water to level itself out. Because me personally, the opinion is you should have been having conversations about your fixed rate when we were sending out all the correspondence.
So all those phone calls, text messages, emails that went unanswered?
Well, I had to keep checking my phone to make sure someone had paid my phone bill because I thought, well, my phone's not ringing. So,
as we were preaching
a
couple of years ago, fix your mortgage when it was at under sub 2%.
Because I don't want our staff members to be fixing their rates, because the only way that they're going to counteract that is going to come and see you and I for pay rises.
And what happens there? CPI keeps going up again.
You bet. Don't give me a reason to convince myself we can't afford to keep you on as a staff member anymore.
Okay.
Just kidding, guys.
Now, I was just having a quick look as Becky was going through that. I've got a ton of questions here, but just conscious of time. What we'll try to do, if we haven't answered your questions, we've got a record here. We'll come back to you individually. So if you've got any others, drop them in the comments, drop them in the Q&A, wherever it is, and we'll make sure that we come back to you. And if you want us to give you a call to discuss in more detail, put your contact details in there, and we will do that. But before I wrap up, guys, where's the sort of prediction? What are we expecting is going to be the peak of when rates sort of, you know, level out and they don't keep going up, and where you're sort of seeing the Reserve Bank is going to find that new normal? Greg, you want to start first?
I don't know.
Okay.
But
good.
I'm not in that sort of thing, but I think as Becky was suggesting, is that it's probably going to be a steady thing. Try and get a bit of normality back in the market. As I say, from my perspective, everything that's happening has been it's falsely pushing things to a point where it shouldn't be. So I think that they will do step by step by step. That's what I think. I don't think we're going to hit the major stuff that in the 80s we saw. I don't believe that at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Des, what's your view?
I think you correctly pointed it out at the beginning.
Pay rise for you. Thank you.
Done. In my mind, once my country reopened and when the war is over, I can see things is going to start slowly normalized. That might be the time we can think, oh, when is it going to stop increasing the rate, or everything's back to normal? For now, I don't know.
Okay, so we've got so far 2 I don't knows. Hopefully that's helped you. Becky, you're gonna round it out and give us a hat trick if I don't know, and leave it all up to me to make the forecast and prediction.
I probably might leave the forecast condition to you then, James. You just gave me a bailout. If you didn't make that last comment, then I was about to do it. But
well, I figured I might as well get a hat trick. At least I can have something.
Yeah. Well, look, I actually don't know. What I do know is we know that there was a rate increase that went through yesterday, and all you can do is, accommodate for your circumstances based on what we do know. Become proactive. And when I say extremely proactive, now's the time to be really alert and making good, conscious financial decisions. And yeah, give us a call and we'll help you out.
All right, so they've left it up to me. The Reserve Bank yesterday said they see the new normal between 1.5 to 1.75%. But guess what? They lied to us last year. They lied to us last month. Or they didn't lie to us, but they've actually had to accept that they've got very little credibility in forecasting because there are so many factors. Now, don't get me wrong. It's really, really hard. I'm taking a swipe at them because it's fun. And it's fun to blame someone else when we can. But, who would have predicted the war in Ukraine? Who would have predicted that while the rest of the world has opened up and forgotten about coronavirus, that China started there, invented the concept of a lockdown, has gone back into lockdown? You can't predict these things. So I will make a prediction. I will sort of lay it out there for you. I think the new normal is going to be somewhere between that 1.75 to 2%. And I think we're probably going to get there and stop seeing these increase in rates somewhere in 2024. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on house prices. I think there's going to be certain areas that will be impacted, that perhaps people were overpaying in the first place. But I really don't see a big thing because, what we are seeing, whilst we've mentioned a lot of the supply side factors are driving this, on the demand side, because of the borders being locked, because of no migration, because we don't have the backpackers, we don't have the students, definitely at the lower end jobs and more of the entry level jobs, the hospitality jobs, there is no staff out there. We know it in our business, we're struggling to fill those jobs. So there are increase in wages. We're paying more for staff now and they're not better staff. It's just a factor of the market. So generally people do have a bit more income. They can sustain this. And I don't think we're going to see a major shock. If you haven't bought a home yet, what does that mean for you? Well, the right time to buy when you can afford it. So if you can afford it, you should still be buying. Don't wait. Don't try and pick the market because as Greg has remembered, what we always say, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you guys want to add before I wrap up?
I'm all good.
I'm all good.
Good?
Yeah.
All right. So before I let you go, as I said, I just want to close out the loop and talk to you as to how you might move forward. We focus on interest rates today, and hopefully we've given you some insight. Hopefully I gave you a little bit of a simpler way to understand the difference between what the Reserve Bank is doing, the federal government is doing, and what your own personal bank is doing. The guys have hopefully answered a lot of those questions and given you some of the insights on the ground as to what's happening. But as a general sense, if you got value out of today, that's great. But how do you move forward and continue to grow that knowledge to make sure that you're well armed to be able to actually take back that control and make sure that you don't have that fear, you don't have that look of a deer in the headlights? Well, the way I see it is you've got three choices. Number one is you can go down path A and you can do nothing. And what I mean by that is make no changes, continue doing what you're doing. Now, for some of you, that's okay because you might be getting what you want, you might be achieving what you want. But for those of you that aren't, just remember, if you don't make any changes, then don't expect a different result. So if you've been looking for that home for the last 2 years and you haven't found it yet, well, something needs to change. So what I hope as a bare minimum, those of you that do want to make a change do, think about what we've said, think about those three pillars. We've focused in on the finance one in particular today. Look back at our past episodes. We go through each one of those pillars every week. Join us next week, next month, whenever it is, and really drill in, make some of those changes, take back that control and go out there and conquer that fear of that problem and get what you want. But what I hope some of you will do, if not all of you will do, that are on today's call, is do it with us. Take the alternative path. That is, get some help, leverage our expertise, leverage our experience. You know, who is Salvo? What are we? Well, we've got a ton of different businesses, but ultimately, we're all about helping you create a home. So let us use that experience, leverage our experience, and let us help you move there faster. So it's not going to be for everyone though. You know, I'd love to say that we can help all of you. You know, we can help people. You've got to be prepared to actually do the work, roll up your sleeves, actually take those actions, because there is no point in studying the theory and not actually putting it into play. And, you know, hopefully today's session has given you some practical tips, some practical insight that you can go out there and do yourself. And if you want more, you want a bit more guidance, then join us, do it with us, let us help you. Now, how can we best help you? Well, I've thought long and hard about it, and I don't know a lot about you right now. We've had plenty of questions I was reading through, but maybe we've met before, maybe we haven't, maybe I've got a face, maybe we've got an email or a name. So the best way that we can help you is to get to know a little bit more about you, meet up one-on-one. We can do that face-to-face, we can do it over Zoom, we can even just do it over the telephone, and spend about 15 to 20 minutes getting a better understanding of where you are right now, where you want to be, identifying those hurdles, and then really mapping out as to how we can help you at each one of those stages, putting together a bit of a plan so that we can move forward together. Now, it's not a big time commitment that I'm asking for you, but I know everyone is busy. So I give you a guarantee that if you do this, you set aside 15 to 20 minutes in your day, that you will leave this session with something that you can immediately implement and get some immediate wins. So we'll make sure that we give you a few things that you can immediately go out there and do that will make those changes for you. So even if you decide you don't want to work with us, that's okay. I guarantee you'll still get something you can immediately put into place. But those that do are the ones that are going to get those results, going to move there faster, and will start thinking about upgrading that home, getting their second home, getting investment property quicker, because they'll understand the pathway to do that, and they'll be able to leverage that experience and expertise. You know, Becky gave that example of how, you know, people were stressing about rates going up. And it was as simple as someone answering his call, coming back to him, and he got the rate reduced by 0.35. So the 0.25 that went up didn't even matter because the rates went down. And that's the kind of leverage that you need to be employing and getting out there and leveraging the experience and the expertise. So if that sounds like you, how do you do it? There's 3 simple ways. Jump into the chat, and the link should be there. If you're on Facebook, I think it's in the description. Your Zoom page should have redirected you to that booking page. If you did join us and you gave us your email address, I'll send you a follow-up email after today's session's ended. So if you don't have your calendar with you, you can click on that link later and book the most suitable time. But don't wait, jump in and do it, because those do book out quickly. We do make sure that in everyone's diaries, we've set aside some time so that they can't book out other appointments just for these, but we do get a ton of people that jump on these. So make sure that you go in and find your preferred time and book that now. All right, we've gone over time, but I do want to just let you know that you've got to make sure that you set aside the time to do what is best for you. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. This was in July last year, in between the 500th and 600th lockdown here in Melbourne. I went away for 4 nights up to Hamilton Island, great part of the world. Great to get away from a Melbourne winter, have a bit of sunshine and enjoy a few nights there with the family. Now, on the second day, my eldest daughter, Isabella, you can see here, said to me that she'd love to go to the top of the mountain and watch the sunrise and grab some photos. Now, I know she wanted to do a TikTok, but for me, I thought that'd be a great experience and something I'd love to do. So that night, I set my alarm for 4:45 a.m. That's right, that's what time you have to get up in Queensland. There's no daylight savings and the sunrise is very, very early there. So I set my alarm, went to bed. Now, what felt like about 15 minutes later, that really annoying iPhone alarm that goes beep, 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 went off. What did I do? I did what I guarantee at least half of you did this morning. I hit the snooze button. 8 minutes later, it went off again. I had a look around, no one was up. I said, this is all too hard, and I hit stop. Now, just before I fell back asleep, I thought, you know what? She's excited. We're only here for a couple of nights. Just get up and do it. So I jumped up, I woke her up. We quickly ran to the top of the mountain. We got this great photo. If you can see it clearly, you can see the joy in her face. And it was a really, really special memory that I'll always have for the rest of my life. Those of you with kids will know that they are young for a very, very short age. And there's a tiny, tiny window that they actually want to do things with you. So this is something that meant a lot to me, and it was a great experience. And I'm really, really glad that I didn't go back to sleep, and I jumped up and I got up and I did this. Now, just remember, it's the people like me that do what sometimes feels hard to do or they don't want to do, that actually take those actions, that will get the great memories like I had, that will have those experiences, that will buy that home, that will find that right home, get that first investment property, refinance their home loan, save money on their interest rate, whatever it is, it's the people that take the action that will get those results. So before you go off to your busy days, forget about what we've talked about here, just take a moment, think about it, because later equals never. So if you do want to move forward, jump on, book one of those meetings with someone on my team, and I guarantee you that you'll have something to go away with and actually put things into action. All right, now that is it. Thank you very much for your time today. As always, I know that everyone is busy and there's plenty of things that you could be doing. So from me and all the guys on the panel, thank you very much for your time today. We look forward to hopefully seeing you again next week. If not, hopefully we see you sometime later this month or any time this year. So guys, thank you for your time. And you again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.